calendar. At this time, board members, is there something that you want pulled from the consent? Member Earl? Number
4 and 5.
4 and 5.
Yeah.
Are there any other items that members wish to remove from our consent? Seeing none, I'm seeking a motion that the board approve the consent calendar. Do we have a second? Second. Got him? Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, the motion before the board is the board approves the consent calendar minus items 4 and 5. All in favor, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
No.
No? Okay. Did you get that? Motion passes. To the items 4 and 5, Board Member Earl, let's start with number 5.
Number 5?
I mean 4, excuse me.
Okay. My question just is, this talks about processes in here, and I understand this is the process we're going through. I just want to know why, what was the reason for, is it just because it's the 5-year or whatever year evaluation? There's just no information on the exact reason why we're redoing this. I have no doubt it's a good reason, but I'm just wondering what that is.
Please come up. Let's see the superintendent.
Hi, can you hear me? Great. Hi, I'm Sarah Whipke, Pre-K through 12 Literacy and Library Media Coordinator. As far as your question around the process, we are following the board-approved standards review process. So at this time, this is the year for library media standards to be brought to you all to determine if you would like them to be reviewed and decide if the review committee will then determine if they need to be revised or not.
Okay, so so it's on a consent calendar, but we're supposed to decide whether or not they're to be revised, or you're making a recommendation to us to have them revised?
Thank you. May I answer?
Yes,
now?
please.
As far as the process, it's there's a timeline, and so with the timeline, this is the year that the library media standards should be brought to the board, to all of you, to determine whether or not you feel it's time for them to be determined to be revised or not. Reviewed, I should say, not revised.
You have a follow-up on 4?
Yeah, I don't, in my view, if that's what we're going to do, they should go through a committee to make that recommendation. I understand this is probably the process we have in place because we're continually vamping this. So maybe I'm not understanding. If it's going on a consent calendar, it would seem like it would not be something we would need more in-depth information on. I'm wanting more in-depth information as to, are we just reviewing this, or are there actual recommendations, and that's the reason why there's something, usually there's something like we need to update them, and here's the reasons why. I guess that's what I was looking for, but if that's not the case, I would almost recommend this went to a committee to review it, to make those recommendations. I don't know if that.
Do you want to respond to the concern?
If I may, thank you. Jennifer
Jennifer
Thronson,
Thronson.
Director of Teaching and Learning. So the board-approved process is the first step, is to bring it to you to say, do we bring the standards review committee to decide if they would recommend to you to revise the standards. So the first step of I think we're up to 13-step process, is this part of the meeting, is to say, it's up for its 7-year review, which is how many years we are on our cycle for. And at this time, bringing that to you for your notification that it is up for review and to proceed on with convening the review committee or not. At that point, we bring the review committee recommendations to the committees, but the process currently states that we come to the full board for the initiation of procuring the review committee.
To start and move.
Yeah.
So you're just saying everything moves forward to the review committee if it's on that cycle?
No, it's a full board decision, so you're absolutely right. Like, you all have the decision to decide, it's up for its 7 years. Do you want us to proceed with the review committee or not, would be the decision point. And then if we decide not to, staff would come to you probably next month and say, in lieu of going with the 7 years, what would you like that to look like? Do you want us to go with the 10-year process or whatever that might look like? All of our standards currently are on a 7-year review cycle, knowing it takes us 2 years to get them revised and another year to get them implemented. It's really a 10-year review cycle at the end of the day.
Okay,
Any other,
I don't know.
any other questions on 4? Yeah, Vice Chair
So
Davis.
just to piggyback on Board Member Earl's question, so if it would have passed through the consent calendar, then would that have started the review process?
Yes.
Okay.
Member Lear?
I think I might be missing the animal in the room, not to badmouth elephants, but is this something you recommend? I mean, do you think it's time to do this? Do you think they're outdated? I'm looking to your expertise, Sarah's and yours.
So from a process standpoint, it is our obligation to come to you to let you know they're up
Get
for
that.
7 years. The recommendations from the field, we haven't heard a need. We have the annual core standards review survey out right now. We have less than, I think, 8% that are dissatisfied with the library media standards at this time, and we've had 2,200 respondents. So it's not a small, last year we had 92. I don't know what I did differently this year to release this survey, but we have a lot of feedback. But within those that have responded, only 8% are dissatisfied or extremely dissatisfied with the library media standards. So that's something for you all to have knowledge about. And we can bring that to the review committee as well to say, from a public standpoint, 2,200 is pretty good for a state survey. We're not seeing an expressed need, but we also want to employ parents and educators in that conversation to see if there are any needs that they're expressing that then we can bring to the board. And you have the ultimate decision to say, we appreciate you recommending us reviewing them, but given these different pieces of feedback, we're going to go ahead and hold for a few more years to do so or proceed on. So that you ultimately have the authority, even after we execute the review committee, to crush or continue the revision process. Crush is not a great word, but I'm going to go with it.
Okay. Thank you. So the option or opportunity before the board, is anyone wanting to take any action on the proposed action in the 12, with the K through 12 library media standards review?
I would recommend it went to a committee for just information to initiate the review. Based on, I just don't have anything to go off to decide whether or not I want to initiate the review.
So your motion is
So, yes,
to have it go to a committee.
just for information to initiate the review. So it's,
So,
yeah.
hang on, the condition to only be informational, if we take something to a committee,
To be actional, to be.
it needs to be actionable for them to say, yeah, that board, our committee wants you to start the review process.
Yeah, because
So-
the review
So you
process
can take it
isn't,
to the committee
a
and
simple
then allow the
process
committee
either.
an opportunity to act. Is that what you're wanting to do?
yep,
So your,
That's my-
so your motion is to have it taken to have it be assigned to a committee?
so we can take action on
Yes.
it.
Okay. I'll state the motion, but I want to state the motion the way that you want it. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it, but I have a clarifying question.
Okay, well, let's,
And
okay,
my
we have a
clarifying
motion
question
and a
is
second, but let's-
because you
let me see
didn't
if she
re-
wants to speak to it, then I'll
Oh.
come to you, the maker of the motion.
Yeah, I just want some information, and I feel like it being on the, and I realize it's process, right? We've always worked through process here. But that process of having enough information to say, yes, I think a review committee should go in place so we can get more in-depth, there needs to be something meatier for me to do that, and I don't have that information, so.
Okay, discussion, Board
And-
Member Lear.
I heard the discussion, obviously, between the two of you, but when you repeated the motion, I didn't hear you say, go to a committee as an action item, which is what I assumed would be
It
then
would
the
be-
intent.
Yeah, the committee, it would be as an actionable item.
Great, thank you. Then I
Like we
second,
request every.
then I
very-
second my second.
Okay,
May I add a little context? We acted incorrectly with the policy. So the policy, when ELA went through, which is where Sarah and Naomi have done just recently, was a consent calendar item. The update, what was done after the ELA standards, was to bring it to full board for discussion. There was quite a bit of discussion behind the scenes on if this stayed on consent calendar or came as a full board discussion item. Many members of the board feel passionate about standards, and that is why it has been changed to policy to be full board. That the Standards and Assessment Committee was insufficient in the past, because this used to go to the Standards and Assessment Committee and has been moved to the full board. So this would take us back a few years to going to committee first. And I just want to help with the process. Many members feel passionate about standards. And so if we go to Standards and Assessment, then the 5 committee members there are ultimately informing that decision, but then we end up with a similar conversation here. And so I would encourage that if we need to come back, I would love for full board to do that conversation and have those questions answered that we would like. And we can come in October. It still delays us either way,
So-
but it would be an option.
So just so that you know, and as far as process goes, even if it goes to a committee and the committee does not act and move on it because it was an actionable item, any board member can take that and put a motion before the full board. So it's still
Yes,
can, even
absolutely.
if it dies out of committee, but it's about
I've
process.
just been through the roller coaster of this particular
I
policy,
understand,
and
but I
it
have a-
continues to ebb and
Yeah,
flow.
but we have a motion, we have a motion on the table. Did you want to speak again to your motion?
And I don't mind if it comes back to us with information. I just want more information. So we can skip that month of going to the committee if we wanted to bring it back to the full board for action next month. I'm fine with that. I just wanted more information. And there wasn't enough here for me to make a decision for the review. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay,
but your
so I
motion's
guess I'm
still on
making
the
amendment
table.
to the motion. Is that-
So the way that I'm viewing this, and Vice Chair Davis, tell me if I'm wrong here, is the motion will send it to a committee as an actionable item, and then is there something will come out of that committee, and if not, the board can still act. Or if this is voted down, if it's voted down, somebody can make the motion to move on the process and get the process started with the 13, how many steps are we now? It seems
13.
13.
There's some A and B in there, and so I go with 13.
So it goes to those 13 steps to get the committee started, and then the committee, things will move out of the committee. Okay. I just want to make sure the board understands their options and opportunities. So, any other discussion? Member Straight.
So does this make it 14 steps?
It delays us by 2 more months. That is, in terms of the cycle, it takes us over 2 years to do this already, and that is part of the difficulty of the process is the length of time. It adds time for us. So happy to come back. I would prefer, as staff, I'm going to give you my preference, to full board next month because it doesn't take 2 months for us to get an approval or a denial. But this delays us 3 months of getting started with the library media standards with this decision. So I just want to be clear, we've been through this process so many times, and it was my fault. They were not informed that we had changed it after the ELA because this was the issue we had with ELA of it being on consent. People wanted to talk about it. It was meant to be a full board option so that you could have the information. Board members Earl is absolutely right. This is what we've had in the past is people wanted information. We just figured it would get pulled off consent and we'd be able to give that information when it got when we submitted it incorrectly. So I apologize as the Director of Teaching and Learning. We will do better in the future in getting it in the right spot. We also have world languages that we'll be bringing to you as they are also up for revision. But that's the concern. We already take 2 years because of the length of process we have, and so it just adds to that timing. And usually puts us awkward. It will be in the middle of a school year when we release them instead of the beginning of the school year.
Member Hanson?
I just think, having been through this a few times, our rubric really is to make sure that these standards are timely and current, and so they make sense in our schools. I think there are very few standards that shouldn't be looked at by a committee every 10 years. We're 7 years now, 2 years onto this. It's going to be 9 years before a new standard would come out here. So I think the board, if it does come back, excuse me, it should come back to the board, not get bounced back to committee and then here if we need additional information. But I I would speak against that and just in getting this, and I would speak in favor of getting this to the committee, having them look at it. And then the Standards and Assessment Committee has a chance to see what they recommend as far as changes. If they're not substantial, we can squelch it right then and stop the process. So I just think there was this is the stopgap. This is the end of the line. It hasn't come up, nothing's bubbled up so far that says this has to be revised, but the timing says it's stale. This is a stale standard, and we need to take a look at it and decide whether to move it forward or not. So that's just my comments.
Okay. I'm not saying, Board Member Lear.
With that additional discussion, that was really helpful, and I appreciate your recommendation. I appreciate just the feeling of the board. I didn't want to tie the board up with one more important, obviously time-consuming thing to do, and the staff, and if you didn't feel it was necessary, but Scott makes a good point, I withdraw my second. Can I do that?
Can you what?
Withdraw my second.
No, you can't.
Oh, okay.
No, we have a motion on the table, but.
All right.
But it's,
There you go. Yeah,
spoke.
yeah, I recognize I can vote
Yeah,
against
okay.
it, but that's helpful. Thanks. It was just a really helpful, brief discussion.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other lights on, let's see, Member Cannon.
Will you just explain so we have a motion on the floor that we'll send it to committee and then lengthen the process by 2 months. If the motion is voted down, what's the other alternative?
Somebody can make a motion
To just
move forward.
Move forward?
Send it directly to the
Committee, which is the actual
Okay,
items
all right. Thank you.
that's in the consent. Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'm going to call this. Am I seeing other hands? I'm looking at body language and lights and so everything else. Let's see if there's okay. We're going to vote on this. The motion before the board is that the board send this item, which is in our general consent item number 4, to committee for action. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed? No.
No.
Motion didn't pass. Any other proposed motions on Member Earl?
I would like to make a motion that it comes before the board next month with additional information for us to take action.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
You second?
I second.
Okay, do you want to speak to your motion?
This is one of the most important things we do, and I realize it's still, so to speak, but I want to know that there's need for that before we go through the whole beginning, because I don't know of any place where we've actually gone through the parent review and we just didn't go on ahead. I don't know of any area there. So I just feel like, give us the information and let's make sure that this is the direction we want to head. So that's my.
Okay. Discussion to the motion, Vice Chair Davis.
I guess it's just a question. Don't we need the information from the 13-person review that then goes to the committee and then the committee decides if it comes to the board? I mean, essentially it goes back through what the first motion was, but it just puts one extra step in and then that's how we get our information. Or am I understanding that wrong?
May I respond?
Jennifer?
I think it could go both ways. I think you could wait, see what the review committee says and say it's insignificant or it's not enough to compel us to update these now. Let's come back in a certain amount of time. The other option is we are doing the queuing rubrics that are also a requirement of this of our standards process, which is looking at how stale are they, how much feedback are we receiving, how if they're not rigorous, do they not meet current standards of what we would expect a standard to be? Given they are old, they may not be written more in a competency-based way that we're really moving towards. So we'll be bringing those rubrics to Standards and Assessment Committee next month, so we could easily preview that rubric with the full board to give you some information related to where staff's kind of sees the standards and the feedback we got from that annual core standards survey to inform. And you could stop the process there, or you could wait for the review committee and allow them to give you those recommendations and then still make that same decision of do we proceed, do we not?
Okay, any other discussion to the motion? Member Moss?
Quick question, Director Thompson sort of asked it. Am I live here?
How much time does the review committee typically spend? Because I understand sort of sometimes in different procedural items, there's an initial preview, which I think is what you alluded to. We think these things might be out of date, therefore we'd like to take a deeper dive. Okay, go get them and come to a committee, right? How long does the review committee usually take once they get going down that 13-step process?
So we usually just, for the review committee, it's usually a couple meetings. Required by law is at least 2 meetings. Generally, we get done in the 2 meetings. Sometimes we need a third. So, and they're usually a couple hours each one. So it's a little bit of staff time to kind of get through that process. But it gives, I think the process is kind in that it does allow for you to hear from stakeholders, their feedback in making those decisions. So there's value both ways. The library is a small population. We have very few librarians in schools. And so we don't necessarily have the masses to be telling us that there is need for revision, but they're an easy group for us to reach out to and ask.
Thanks.
And if I just might, I don't speak to very many emotions, but my biggest concern is what's happening in that space of, we talked about the library media standards. A lot has happened over the last 5 to 7 years, and more is happening with everything that we've got happening in the way that we go about learning. And so I can't help but think there's absolutely going to be something that's going to come out of there. And so it's about timing of when do we start with those proposed betterments with a different standard. So I do have a concern. So the motion before the board is that, Member Hutchins, please.
Just a quick clarification, if I could. So my understanding from what you said previously is that this motion would actually put in the proper process of what should have happened today, but we'll just be doing it in the next meeting.
Yes, it's my error, and I deeply apologize for wasting your time today. We should have come with a full board item instead of a consent calendar item.
Okay. Any other? Seeing none, okay, the motion before the board is that this item that was on the general consent, 5.4, come before the full board again next month. Is that correct? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? I didn't hear a no. Motion passed. Oh. Yours?
Aye.
Okay, all right. With the noes, raise your hand. Okay, Member Hanson? No. Was a no. Member Cannon? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, we're to, Member Earl, do you want to speak?
Yes, this is on number 5, and I just want to know if the change in the new name, Family and Human Services, is satisfying the concerns that were raised earlier this year. That's all, yes or no?
Okay. Okay, you want to answer the?
Hello, Talia Longhurst, Director of Career and Technical Education. To answer your question, as far as I'm aware, I've not heard any further comments about the
Okay.
title.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the Career and Technical Education CTE approved programs for school year 22-23.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion to the motion? Seeing none, the motion before the board is to accept the actionable item on the Career and Technical Education CTE approved program school year 22 and 23, correct? Let's vote on this. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Voting is unanimous. Thank you. That concludes our consent calendar. I